Just so everyone knows, I'm AJ Alonso working here at Demand Drive, and I have a great team with me here today. We've got a couple of speakers who are really well-versed in the space, starting off with our very own John Hanman, the VP of Sales at Demand Drive. John, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience real quick?
Yeah, sure. VP of Sales here at Demand Drive. Been here for the last 5 years, been in tech over 10 years, and been in sales the whole time, pretty much. And intent data is something that we offer here at Demand Drive as part of our solution, and we've been noticing more and more interest in the topic, and so we thought we'd host a webinar today addressing some of those questions, basically.
Nice.
Yeah.
And to help us weed through all of that noise, like you mentioned, we have a seasoned Demand Gen pro joining the webinar, Becky Mendenhall, who runs Demand Gen over at Cumulus Networks. So, Becky, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, thanks. So, as you said, I run demand generation at Cumulus Networks right now, so handling all of our inbound and outbound activities from a digital perspective as well as events. And we've been on this ABM journey for a couple of years now and at a couple of my previous companies. So it's an ever-changing, ever-evolving space. So always happy to wax poetic on it.
Nice. Well, thanks, Becky.
Nice to have you with us. Before we jump into some of the content, I just wanted to go through some quick housekeeping. There will be a chance to answer some questions at the end of the webinar, so keep those in your pocket until we get to the end. We'll give you an opportunity to ask them. And this will be recorded and sent out to everyone who registered, so if you weren't able to make it today, you will be getting this in your inbox shortly. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John, and we're going to be talking about intent data.
Thank you, AJ. So, yeah, before we kind of jump into the meat of what we're going to be covering today, I just want to provide a quick overview and introduction as to what we actually mean when we say intent data. So for many of the attendees today, this might be a bit of a review over some of it, but it should be helpful to kind of address some of the newer types of intent data that really is going to be our focus today. And then we can get into how kind of intent data is used by some of the leading demand generation professionals, Becky being an example of that, and then would kind of discuss what gaps or problems still exist with the implementation of this kind of lead generation source or data source. And then we can discuss some ideas about really the best practices today around how to address some of these drawbacks, and hopefully giving you a few tactics that might be useful for your own marketing efforts. It's the overall goal here. So I'll start, I guess, with a definition of intent data. The formal definition is basically behavioral information that is collected about an individual's activities that might signal interest in a product or service. And when you break it down, really almost all marketing activities are designed to measure some sort of intent or even create some sort of intent to purchase. Whether you kind of fill out a form on a website to receive a piece of content or swipe your badge at a trade show, if you're and your info is captured, you're considered a lead and have expressed a level of intention to purchase some sort of solution. But as marketing technology has advanced, marketers now can measure intent from potential buyers that have not necessarily identified themselves or provided any information. For our purposes today, that is what we kind of are going to be addressing, that area of intent data. Essentially, when you search for something online or visit a website, you are expressing an interest in that topic, and your information can be captured and used by marketers in several different ways, and sometimes unwittingly to the actual prospect as well. So how do marketers use intent data today? And Becky, I'd love for you to weigh in here a little bit as to how you're using intent data today, but before I kind of address that, I've broken it down into two parts, two essential definitions of intent data. You've got first party and you've got third party. Now, first party is people visiting your website who are identified by their IP address, which is then mapped to their company's name. You can use solutions like Command-Base or Marketo web personalization to leverage that information and personalize content and create marketing campaigns. that's kind of the unknown first-party information. Then you've got the known first-party, the kind of golden grail of an inbound lead. People visiting your website, filled out a form, they provided their contact information, they're waiting for you to contact them. You can either put them in a marketing automation form or even ship them straight off to sales. But Becky, I'd love to understand how you are today using that kind of intent data in your current marketing campaigns and efforts.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, as you said, you broke it down really well here. There's two sort of different types of intent data. There's that behavioral data, like who's actually taking activities with your brand, visiting the website, clicking on emails, downloading content. And then there's like the intent data that you can look at from an organizational perspective. So I think intent data is really important when you start to take an account-based approach rather than a leads-based approach. And how we use it at Cumulus is we have a list of, say 500 or more target accounts at any one time. It's incredibly difficult to spread all of your efforts across an entire target account list. So what we try to do from a sales and a marketing perspective is prioritize those accounts that are showing an intent, so a likelihood to purchase, because you might know that an account is a good fit for you, but the real piece of, actually making business and seeing the dollar signs is knowing if they're a good fit for you, but they're also in market for a solution similar to what you're offering. So I think, that's kind of the really important piece to identify that timeliness of doing your outreach from a sales and a marketing perspective.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think we spoke about this offline a little bit, Becky, the way you define intent data, when you kind of whack the word behavioral in there, you're kind of talking more or less when they've engaged with your brand. Is that right? As opposed to when they haven't, it's just intent data. Is that your definition, would you say?
Yeah, exactly. So I think we try to look at, I think of it like the trifecta of like what is a perfect account. It's going to have the fit, the intent, and then what I call engagement. So fit is how attractive is that account? Like how well of a fit are they for us based on who we've sold to previously? So you can, I guess you'd term that as an ideal customer profile, an ICP. The engagement is have they actually engaged with your brand? So from Cumulus, like have we seen that account is visiting our website? Have we seen leads come in through content syndication or through webinars or through events? And then the intent is that account showing buying signals, not necessarily with us, with our brand, but out there in the market. And that's where you get into platforms like Bombora or 6 Sense or some of those other vendors that try to identify in-market signals based on all their creepy web crawlers. So that's really what we define as intent. It's not necessarily with our brand, but they're showing research and buying signals externally.
Right, and thank you, Becky, for that perfect segue. The kind of second definition there of intent data, the way we're talking about today, you've got that behavioral one that's engaged with your brand, maybe filled out some information, looked at some content that is branded. But then there's that third-party intent data, both anonymous and known. So people visiting other websites that potentially, you don't own as a brand, but they are talking about a topic that is relevant or that your brand or solution would fall under, say a Forbes.com magazine, online magazine or something like that, where their IP addresses are collected by vendors like you mentioned, Becky, Bombora and Big Willow is another one, for example. And then you've got kind of the known third-party data, which is, again, you alluded to it a little bit, things like content syndication, people visiting other websites who have filled out a form so that they could download some information and content on the website, but they become known to the website owner, and vendors like TechTarget, for example, is another one, make that information available to marketers. That's traditional content syndication, is that known third party. But the newest one really that's come to light in the last year or two, and the one that we've been receiving a lot of information about and that we're leveraging today quite a bit, is that third-party anonymous intent data. Because it's new and because a lot of marketers are testing it out, haven't had a lot of experience with it, unlike the traditional kind of lead gen sources like content syndication from third-party sources, there are still some some issues with it, some difficulties in incorporating into current lead gen and demand gen strategies and marketing campaigns. So let's take a little bit more at this anonymous third-party intent data. It's pretty easy to understand in the consumer space as we see more and more retargeting ads, for example, pop up on Instagram for those shoes you just looked at Nike, for example. But in the B2B space, it gets a little bit more complicated. Buying cycles obviously are longer, purchases are larger, far more people are involved in buying decisions. So intent data is a very useful tool, as we just discussed, but there are still many issues facing demand generation professionals today. And I'm hoping Becky might shed light on a few of those, give up some of her difficulties today. But one of them that I've noticed a lot from our clients that they've mentioned is having full account visibility. So since there are likely many people involved in the buying decision, you can't just gather information and retarget one individual person and hope that to be successful. Let's say the CEO or something like that, and you get them at the perfect time, it's not going to be that effective. So the problem becomes, how do we tie together disparate intent data on individuals to understand what's happening on an account level? And Becky, I'd love for you to kind of chime in there if you come across that difficulty, and if so, how are you kind of trying to solve it today?
Yeah, you raise a really good point. It's like historically, demand generation especially has always been on the hook for leads generated, right? So it's like, give me more leads, give me more leads. And I think more and more people, part of the reason that account-based marketing is becoming a really hot topic right now, it's been around forever, right? There's just a lot of tools that can kind of make it scalable right now. And the reason it's becoming a hot topic is you don't usually sell to one person. Even if you're at a small organization, like if I'm going to be purchasing a product or a solution for Cumulus, I'm not the only person involved in that decision. There's multiple people. When you start to sell a technology to enterprises, you realize that you can't just get one lead in the system and expect that that's going to turn into a deal. You have to engage multiple influencers and decision makers. So that's why at Cumulus we use a lot of tools for like display advertising to actually try to surround the account, get multiple people engaging with our brand and on our website. And the full account visibility it's great when you can actually see the types of content that this account is engaging with on your site, and then also externally, what are the keywords that they're engaging with, via Big Willow or 6 Sense or Bombora. If you can see those keywords and then craft your outbound message to a prospect that you're working, we've seen that our response rate has actually improved quite a bit. So we had one statistic where an account rep was reaching out to individuals sort of on almost a cold calling basis, which is not a fun job by any stretch of the imagination, and seeing that it could take 40 or more touches for every individual before they got a response. Once they started using some of the intent data and seeing the keywords that this account was engaging with, and the links from our website that they were visiting, and then craft the outreach leveraging that, the number of touches, decreased by half. So went from 40 touches to about 20 touches. In a salesperson's world, that's an incredible gain in efficiency, and it makes that arrow or that bullseye that you're going towards a lot more narrow, which is exceptionally powerful. So I think that's where the intent data comes into play. You can see, are they in market, and then what are the keywords and the topics that are relevant to them? Everybody wants to be sold to in a way that's relevant. If you come at me with pants that have 3 legs, it's not going to be a really good solution for me. So I think having that visibility into what topics are relevant to the user makes you a more relevant, strategic person to talk to, not just a salesperson.
Totally. And that kind of brings up another area that I do want to address, but I've just noticed that a little question has popped up here, and it is something I should probably address. I'm assuming a lot of people have had some exposure to kind of that third-party anonymous intent data, but that assumption maybe incorrect, as you know, it is a pretty new type of solution, and I guess I'll describe for everyone what I mean by, you know, what, for example, what solutions like Bombora and Big Willow are actually doing, and what kind of information you're actually receiving from them. So typically, third-party intent data that is scraped from the web essentially is IP address triggered. So therefore, what Bombora, for example, does is they would give you information about accounts via IP addresses that have been particularly engaged with a certain keyword search or involved with some online behavior that would suggest they are researching a specific topic. Let's say, for argument's sake, CRM, and Coca-Cola have been indicating that from all the IPs that have been pinging to these data sources that have been hosting CRM discussions via social media, via forums, via third-party websites, content being hosted, that Coca-Cola have been surging, quote-unquote, in the CRM topic. In other words, there have been multiple hits on CRM-hosted content. Therefore, the assumption is made that Coca-Cola is most likely shopping around for a CRM solution. The data that you actually receive is exactly that. It would be simply that there's been a lot of activity in Coca-Cola around CRM. Salesforce.com, would you like this information? Yes, we would. Okay, great. Now what? How do we actually target Coca-Cola? Well, Coca-Cola is a bad example, probably because there are, you know, over 1,000 sales execs that could be involved with the buying cycle of a CRM. And that's where kind of having full account visibility becomes very important. Being able to account map that specific account, understand who the buyers might be, the personas, who they might be, and who's influencing, who's decision makers, and so on and so forth, to really narrow down who it is that is doing that research. So kind of back to the other issue that Becky highlighted, as with any demand generation campaign, marketing campaign, the targeting is becoming more and more important, purely because once you do have that connection, which is so rare nowadays, it could take up to 40 tries, for example, the message which you're hitting those individuals with has to be extremely relevant. And the way that you can do that is by data enrichment. So now that you have, you know, the intent data to show that Coca-Cola, for example, is interested in purchasing a CRM, you've now account mapped, you've got, 20 or so individuals that you know are most likely the ones that are responsible for that surge in activity and behavior information online to suggest that they're looking for a CRM. Now you need to reach out with them and kind of differentiate yourself from any other CRM out there that's trying to win their business, just like any marketing campaign at this point. And I'd love to know, Becky, how you're kind of today enriching this type of data to make sure that you're pointing your message and the message to your marketplace correctly.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you can have all the tools in the world to sort of capture this data, but the question is, and where it becomes really effective, is how you present that both to the marketing team and to the sales team. So we use a platform right now, and I'm not going to give away names because this is not intended to be a commercial, but we use a platform that captures sort of the fit model. So, you know, based on who we've sold to in the past, how good of a fit is this account or is this contact? And then also, are they showing signs of being in purchase? So if they're in purchase or consideration or decision. So having a tool that we have that presents that within Salesforce, which is the platform that our sales team uses, is incredibly effective, because then, you know, sales can come in on a daily basis and say, show me all the accounts that are in my named account list that are showing signs of having some sort of purchase on the horizon and are a good fit for me. And then when they can drill into that and then also see, hey, this account, even if they don't know the individuals, but the account is visiting the website and they're looking at a solutions page on automation, then the rep knows to reach out to that account with a story around automation. So the enrichment getting that data around the contextuality is really important, but you have to be able to present that to sales in a way that like weaves in with their daily activity. We've tried in the past to use just spreadsheets. You know, we've done trials with some intent vendors where we just say, hey, these accounts are searching on these keywords, and you send a spreadsheet over to the sales team. I guarantee you nobody is going to look at that spreadsheet because they are in Salesforce daily just working through their queues. So you have to find a way to take the data and weave it into people's daily activities and daily workflows, because just sending them spreadsheets to work off of is not an effective use of their time. And it makes it really difficult for marketing as well to operationalize that. You want to have a tool that you can go and say, show me a report of all the accounts right now that are searching on automation terms. Boom, great. All right, I'm going to execute a display campaign on automation. So trying to weave your message to the interest of the accounts.
Yes.
And I will say, you raised a good point, too, around enrichment and sort of quality of data, and there's really no easy answer there. I think it's you have to always try to negotiate an out with vendors. If the data just doesn't work, you don't want to be stuck with a vendor that's giving you faulty data for a whole year, you know. So you really need to test and do some POCs before you actually go with a partner, because the quality and the validity of the data is an incredibly important piece to the whole puzzle.
It is indeed, and on that point, actually, Becky, you raised a really good one. You know, it's also important to probably find a vendor that is able to adapt the data that they're giving you dependent on the feedback that you're giving the vendor. It's important not to just see this as almost a product. It's more like a service. Data is more like a service in that you should be able to engage with your vendor and say, okay, that batch of data wasn't very effective. Let's look at why that might be. Let's pull some different triggers and find out if we should be looking at some different type of accounts, some different type of individuals within that account, different stakeholders. Maybe we should look at trying to enrich that data a little bit more so that the message that we're coming to these people with is more targeted, for example. And yeah, it is difficult to enrich data. There are some ways that you can. There are some vendors that can help, but essentially the type of data that you might want to look for, especially to enrich intent data and stand out from anyone else that might know about the fact that a certain account is potentially in a buying cycle, is to understand things like, tech stack, tech install, for example, is one easy thing now that a lot of vendors are offering to easily weave into your messaging and say, hey, XYZ, you have a certain very compatible piece of technology that we can very easily integrate with. Let's have a chat. We think we can help you here, XYZ, for XYZ reason. Also, maybe there's some trigger events that are going on in that account that can easily be sourced through some automated web scraping technology. But all of this enrichment, at the end of the day, does boil down to, is it going to be used? And you brought up a very good point there, Becky. You can have the best data in the world, the best messaging in the world, but if that message isn't going out efficiently or to the right people, or the data hasn't been actioned, then it's really for now. So process and methodology is always a very important area to make sure that this information is being used effectively, making sure we and stakeholders who touch this data within your company do so effectively, consistently, and leveraging the fact that these target accounts have shown intent. And it really starts with education. You do have to make sure that, say, these leads eventually, after going through a nurture campaign, will be filtered through into sales after being scored. Sales, unless they're told, will treat it like any other lead. They may have a few templates, email templates that they know work well, and send those email templates to this account, thinking it's just a normal identified via ICP or some account-based marketing technique account, and it will be less effective. So actually, if you could go into a little bit more detail, perhaps, Becky, and how you're integrating kind of, this almost is more of an ABM type conversation now, but how you're integrating, not just other stakeholders in marketing that touch this type of data and these lead gen data sources, but also sales, and more about that process that can really make sure that these are being actioned appropriately.
Yeah, that's a great comment or thread. I mean, I could talk about the integration, the alignment between sales and marketing till I'm blue in the face, but
right.
I think having regular touch points with sales and firstly understanding like what are the triggers and the indicators that they look for when they're actually trying to qualify an account, right? So if you understand if you're just building blindly like models and keyword triggers that sales doesn't actually think are effective, then they're not going to use the data. So initially you have to meet with sales and understand what are the indicators, or like you said, even like the install, like the applications or the products that they're currently running, behind the firewall. What are those things that you look for to help try and qualify if an opportunity is going to be a good one? And then having regular syncs with them to make sure that they are actioning the data. So here's where, for myself in most of my roles, strong alignment with sales leadership is really important to keep sales, keep them accountable for actioning on the data. So if you have a list of, 50 accounts per territory, maybe you have a monthly sync with the salesperson to say, okay, here are your 50 target accounts. Here are the keywords that we're seeing that they're searching on. Here are the display campaigns that we're running, and we've seen increased engagement with these 4 accounts. Oh, by the way, we've also seen, these 10 accounts have had multiple leads come in over the past month. Have you actually reached out to them? Because it can be very manual, and that's the little trick that nobody really wants to tell you, is that it's still, even though there's all these tools to make things very automated, there's still a lot of manual effort, and there's still that need for interaction from person to person for marketing and sales. Because if it was so easy and so automated that it just ran in the background, there would be no need for a marketing person or a salesperson. It's not so automated yet that it takes out human effort. So I think that has to happen as well internally with sales and marketing. So we have monthly syncs with our territories to go through their target accounts and talk about, where we're seeing engagement, which accounts have they been reaching out to, have we had any meeting sets. And that's actually really important as well. When you reach the end of a quarter or 6 months, you want to look at your target accounts and say, okay, which ones have we put campaigns in front of and had 0 love back? If we've had 0 love over 6 months, maybe we take those accounts off the target account list and we swap it for new ones, because you can't continue to bang your head against a wall if you're not seeing progress, but you do have to give it time, because account-based marketing is not something where you see a return necessarily overnight. Sometimes it will take a quarter or 2 quarters, and you just kind of have to be really patient with it.
Right, especially in enterprise sales. So yeah, that's a really good point, Becky. Thank you. And I've just noticed we are running up against time here. We've got a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer, but we can certainly answer them offline.
Yeah, we let that one sneak in earlier, so
Yeah, that's true. So a quick conclusion, I think, and then we'll wrap this up. But I think, first of all, Becky, thank you so much for your time today. It's really useful to have your perspective as someone in the trenches and someone at the forefront of using all of this technology. So thank you. But to conclude, I think it's been a productive discussion, and really intent data can be an extremely valuable data source, but it must be leveraged correctly. It's certainly not a standalone solution. It must be augmented, as we talked about. It has to be enriched and effectively actioned to leverage its full potential as a data source that, if you can prioritize it, will significantly increase your conversion rates. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. We will address all your questions, and as AJ mentioned at the beginning, we will send out this recording.
Yes, we will. Thanks again for joining us, Becky. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for having me, and I look forward to to seeing all the people that watch this webinar just excel at ABM, I guess.
Perfect. Thank you.